Hello, everyone, and let me find my clicker. Welcome to ObservabilityCON 2022. My name is Raj. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Grafana Labs. ObservabilityCON is a very special conference for us. We do it once a year, focused on the core use case of our stack, observability, helping developers, SREs, operators run their software, their applications, their infrastructure better, faster, more reliably, ultimately helping them innovate with less risk. And so it's really awesome that we're back in person, live in New York City. How many of you are from the New York metro area? Nice. Well, I live here too, and let me just say this is, in my opinion, the greatest city in the world. So I'm really, really glad to be here. Haven't spent a lot of time in New York. It's been a surreal last few years for all of Grafana Labs, for myself. I've been making up for lost time the last year. Been on the road, done about 400,000 miles and really enjoying it. But spent all of COVID in a hotel room in Singapore. And that was really surreal for the company. But it's really great to be doing this back in person. And this is the first time since COVID that we've done ObservabilityCON in a live event. And just can't beat the energy, the hallway conversations. Really glad to be doing it. Speaking of in person and surreal things, you know, the company grew from barely over 100 people before COVID to over 1,000 people today. And we did that as a remote-first company, post-geographically. And it was really an incredible experience, bittersweet in many ways. And just a few months ago, we got the whole company together for the first time since we were about 100 people. So that's a picture of what we called Grafana Fest in Whistler. And it was just, like I said, surreal, absolutely incredible. So this is a team and a company that I'm so proud to be a part of. We've been innovating like crazy over the last year, and we're really excited to share some of that innovation within the observability use case. So before we get started, just wanted to say thank you to all of you, not just for coming, everyone who's live streaming in, but specifically to our users, our community, our customers. Who here is actually a customer of Grafana Labs, by the way? Very cool. That's actually more than I expected. So thank you very much, by the way. You really help us actually develop this open source software. So we're forever indebted to you. But not only our customers, but our community. That's our superpower, right? We get so much lift, so much feedback, and so much energy from the wider open source community. And it ultimately helps us build better open source software. So I want to talk a little bit about the growing observability ecosystem to kick this off. It's really incredible. I mean, we've been doing this for about 8 years now, and I think the scale, the power, the scope of what's happening within the observability space really blows us away, right? Software is increasingly complex, increasingly critical to every company, and this whole market is bigger than anyone thought. The infrastructures that we're building, the amount of engineers we all have working on our software, the complexity of the stack is just much more sophisticated. And you know, at Grafana Labs, we really prioritize interoperability. We really think about the ecosystem. As an open source company, the ecosystem is really important to us. And so what does this mean practically? All of this thinking about the ecosystem is encapsulated in a philosophy that is really at the heart of everything that we do and really drives a lot of our strategy within observability. And that strategy and that philosophy is called our Big Tent, the Grafana Big Tent. And so what does this mean? It means that as a company, we really prioritize interoperability with the wider ecosystem, right? Most of you are working in companies or organizations that has many vendors, many observability solutions, many tools, many databases. You know, how do you make sense to out of all of this? We're pretty unique and I think differentiated as a vendor because we don't require you to consolidate all your data into a single platform. We allow you to keep your data where you want it, use the technologies that make sense for your company, use the vendors that make sense, and ultimately own your own observability strategy. And we think that that changes the relationship that we can enjoy with our customers and users because it makes us more of a true partner rather than a vendor that's trying to consolidate all your data and also spend. So we've gone a long way with the wider ecosystem. And there's a lot of vendors and companies in the space that we're doing a lot of interesting work with. There's one in particular that I'd like to highlight. And this is the first of several announcements we'll be making on this keynote. So this is a company called Isovalent, and their project is a company called Cilium. So what we're announcing today is a collaboration between Isovalent and Grafana. Who here is using Cilium or using eBPF with Kubernetes? Anyone? Few people. It's really interesting technology. We're really interested and impressed with the Isovalent team. We participated in their Series B and invested alongside some of their investors. And what we're announcing today is an integration between Cilium and Isovalent Enterprise and Grafana Cloud. You'll be able to basically monitor your Cilium traffic with a Cilium data source that is now available for Grafana, and it comes with a bunch of pre-built dashboards spanning high-level overviews. So really excited about this. If you're interested in learning more about our developing story with Cilium or eBPF, please go and find Rich Schofield, who's a principal solutions engineer at Isovalent. He's at the Ask the Experts desk, and we'll also be having a deep dive into Grafana Cloud integrations using the Cilium Isovalent integration that our product manager, Richard Lamb, is going to lead. So that's announcement number one. Back to Big Tent. So we've really prioritized interoperability with the wider community, a bunch of different vendors. Grafana started with just Graphite and Influx Data and Prometheus, and now there's several dozen vendors, companies that are in our ecosystem that we're working with. Many of them are customers and partners, and we all want to make sure that your experience using other vendors, other databases, is excellent with Grafana, right? Because Grafana is the thing that helps you contextualize and bring it all together. But it's not just third-party vendors and databases in the wider ecosystem. We've also started releasing some of our own backend software, and many of you have noticed this, I'm sure, and are even starting to use our backend software over the last several years. So to add within the Big Tent, Grafana Labs has released 3 key pieces of software: Loki for logs, Tempo for traces, and Mimir for metrics. And those 3 pieces of software are our implementations of opinionated software, highly scalable software, and it complements our strategy of Big Tent. And we're continuing to innovate in this space and release new solutions that are part of our ecosystem. In fact, later today, in just about 10 or 20 minutes, we're going to release and announce 2 new open source software projects that we're really excited about. But I'm not going to steal Tom and Merle and Cyril's thunder there, so you'll have to wait about 10 or 20 minutes. But we've really got this culture of innovation at Grafana Labs that I'm really proud about. So the Big Tent is getting bigger, both third-party vendors, other solutions, partners, competitors. The tent is big, the tent is vibrant, the tent is diverse, and the tent is meant to encapsulate everything that you want to do within the observability space so that you can own your own observability journey. So Loki, Tempo, Mimir with Grafana, where's this all going? You might have heard of this 4 letters, this acronym called LGTM, and that's where this is all going. And LGTM means a lot of different things to us as a company, and it really means 3 things that I'll tell you about. The first is maybe the most obvious to certain people. Who here is a developer or has opened a pull request on GitHub? Anyone? All right, anyone want to take a guess of what LGTM stands for? Looks good to me, exactly. This is literally a hat tip to the developers, the SREs, the operators, the practitioners, the people that we actually build the software for. Looks good to me. Hopefully it's the phrase that you can use when you fix the issue, troubleshoot the issue, resolve the problem, put the pull request in, close the bug. That's ultimately a big part of what observability is all about. So looks good to me is the first kind of tongue-in-cheek definition of LGTM. The second definition of LGTM represents how composable our stack is and the Big Tent philosophy. And that is logs with, of course, Grafana, and traces and metrics. And it's up to you, again, owning your own observability journey, to decide which technologies to use. If you want to use Splunk for logs, that's great. They're an enterprise plugin. You want to use Humio or Elastic for logs, that's your choice. Elastic and Humio are both customers of ours, and we're working together to make sure that experience within Grafana is great. You want to use Loki for logs? Fantastic. That's our logging platform, but it's all about choice, and that's the unique capability that we offer you as a vendor. So logs, Grafana, traces, and metrics. That's the composable, interoperable definition. And then the third definition of LGTM is our curated definition. It's our opinionated definition. It's our definition where we provide the entire stack in a way that is really easy to use, really integrated, and really scalable. So the third definition is Loki with Grafana and Tempo and Mimir. So 3 definitions, it's a strategy, and I think this is a great segue to pass it off to the person who's ultimately been really a key part of both the LGTM strategy and the LGTM execution. He's our VP of Technology. He's also a Prometheus maintainer. Please welcome Tom Wilkie. Tom?
You're holding the water the whole time. Hey everyone, thank you very much for having me. So, what slide are we on? I want to talk first a little bit about kind of what it means to get started with LGTM and what you have to do to adopt our platform. You know, Raj talked about Big Tent, about how it's composable and how you can have the choice and the freedom to pick the tools that suit you. And I think a lot of our early adopters were very kind of excited by this, right? I'm looking in the audience here and I see whole teams that came together about curating this platform for their own organization. This was open, it was composable, but sometimes that comes at a cost, right? Sometimes it takes expertise to get the best out of this combination of technology. So I want to talk to you a little bit about those challenges and what we're trying to do to make this easier. So first off, the first challenge, you know, you've really got to kind of get the telemetry into the stack, right? You've got to choose the right Prometheus exporters. You've got to, you know, sometimes you've got to go on GitHub and download them and compile them yourself. You know, you've got to choose the right agents and the right, you know, infrastructure components to propagate the telemetry. You know, here we've got Prometheus agent. This is actually a project we started at Grafana Labs and then upstreamed into Prometheus. You've got Fluentd. This is a great logs agent, and then the OpenTelemetry collector for traces. You know, you've got to piece this all together, configure it appropriately. You've got to make sure you've got the right service discovery and labels, and you've got to make sure this all works, right? And then you've got these multiple components that need deploying in your infrastructure, and it's challenging sometimes. You know, I mean, if you're like me, you kind of enjoy the challenge, I think, but not all our customers are like that. And then the next step, you've got to kind of build some dashboards. You've got to curate your alerts. We've been fostering a community of dashboards on Grafana.com. There are also lots of them on GitHub. And it's great, but again, it kind of depends on your choice of exporters. Right? You need to make sure your labels are correct, and it's incredibly frustrating to go and download a dashboard and find that it just doesn't work for you. Alerts, you know, we don't all want to spend our days sat staring at dashboards, so we have computers that do that for us. And they'll tell us proactively when something's gone wrong, but you need to build those alerts. And we've not really seen a community of alerts kind of get developed on GitHub, so that's another challenge. And then finally, you know, you've got these alerts and the system's telling you when it's gone wrong. You really need to make sure that gets to a human, right? You really need to make sure that someone is perhaps woken up in the middle of the night when something's gone wrong, or maybe you've got shifts and escalations that you need to deal with. So this is the challenge, and I think up until now, a lot of our community have been early adopters and really have kind of embraced this challenge and found it really kind of empowering. But as these projects have got more successful and more widespread, more and more people have kind of come to us and gone, you know, I don't really know how to do all of this. I don't really have the time to learn. I don't really have access to the expertise to kind of really get started with this, right? So we've been trying to solve that problem. So first off, I want to talk about the Grafana agent, right? The Grafana agent was our first attempt to kind of simplify this experience without moving away from our open source roots. You know, we've packaged together and curated the best of the open source components into a single thing to deploy, a single thing to manage, a single thing to configure. You know, this was actually a project we started a couple of years ago. It embeds about 20 of the Prometheus exporters, and we support all of them and actively contribute to all of them. It includes the Prometheus agent, as I manage. This is actually where the Prometheus agent started off life. And we've put in Promptail. This is Loki's agent, which uses Prometheus service discovery to label your logs consistently with your metrics, so you can kind of get that nice correlation flow in Grafana working. And finally, we're huge supporters of OpenTelemetry. We've been investing a lot of time and effort in the past couple of years in OpenTelemetry. And the agent embeds the OpenTelemetry collector to help you propagate traces. There's all sorts of cool stuff we can talk about in the agent, but unfortunately I don't have a huge amount of time, so I'm going to move on. Next up, I'm going to talk about dashboards and alerts. As I said, we've been building this community of dashboard sharing on Grafana.com, but there was always kind of this disjoint, you had to get all the other stuff right for it to work. So we thought, we want to take this a step further. We want to bundle dashboards, alerts, with the instructions you need to get started, with the exporters that are embedded in the agent. And we call these observability, looking at the wrong slide. We call these observability integrations. So these are packaged sets of dashboards and alerts. They come with instructions. They come with an app built into Grafana that really guides you through the process of getting started with them. We've so far built about 53 of them as of today. Number's probably out of date. They bottle up the best practices, and we work closely with the communities for each of these projects to make sure the dashboards reflect what you really should be looking at. The vision here is that these should really help you get started in 5 minutes. Instead of days, it should be as simple as clicking through a few steps, deploying the agent, and you're there. One of the things that I'm particularly pleased with is more recently we found that these integrations really help you kind of deploy those best practices throughout your organization. So instead of just focused on the getting started, this is actually now about getting that bottled up expertise throughout a bigger organization. These have been used in Grafana Cloud now over 100,000 times. I remember when we started this project and we had one integration, and it was kind of a little bit embarrassing. And now we've got 50, and it's kind of used 100,000 times. It's been fantastically successful. The next one I want to talk about is when we had to go with more than an integration, when we needed to build a more rich, a more curated experience. And this was with Kubernetes. So who is using Kubernetes? Okay, not bad, not bad. We've been on Kubernetes in Grafana Cloud for the best part of 6-7 years now. We took the initial Kubernetes integration. It was based on a Kubernetes mix-in project that I started in the community 4 years ago, I think now. And we up-leveled it. We've made it richer. We've made it more interactive. We've built a React app that's embedded inside Grafana and allows you to navigate through your workloads, through your namespaces, through your nodes, and really kind of understand the behavior of your application inside Kubernetes. This is all powered by Prometheus metrics. So one of the features we're hoping to bring to it pretty soon is the ability to go back in time and kind of see what was happening at 4 a.m. when you were paged and get that kind of insight into the cluster. We think this is pretty awesome. It's an incredibly rich experience. We use it all the time ourselves. It's used now by about 1,000 users in Grafana Cloud on a monthly basis, so it's slowly getting there. We only launched this, I think it was July this year when we launched this, so it's pretty recent and new. So finally, I want to talk about IRM. Right, the IRM component up until now has been a third-party integration for us. We've had notification channels for all of the popular services, and Alert Manager integrates really well with things like PagerDuty, with things like VictorOps, things like Slack. Starting kind of the end of last year, this time last year, we started to kind of show our ambitions in this space. And who here are familiar with the kind of IRM projects that we've started in Grafana Cloud or in Grafana? Okay, this is probably the newest thing, so hopefully you can use this day to really find out a little bit more about it. So first, Grafana alerting. Everyone here hopefully is familiar with Grafana alerting. In Grafana 8, we started a project to kind of bring the power of Prometheus alerts to all of the data sources inside Grafana. And in Grafana 9, we switched that to be the default and made it generally available. Grafana On-Call, this is a project we launched just under a year ago. This brings kind of scheduling, escalations, and generally kind of making sure a human is told about an alert. It brings it to Grafana, integrated deeply into the platform. And there's a really good talk coming, I think it's at 11:30 today? Yep, 11:30 today, where the team will go into a lot more detail. I think that's one of the talks I'm most excited about. And then finally, the most recent addition to this suite is Grafana Incident. And this is for managing complicated incidents that involve multiple people, ones that you're probably going to want to do a post-mortem on afterwards. And it helps you curate, it helps you know who's responsible for what, and it gathers all the information you need to kind of figure out what happened after the fact. This is all really tied together with a lot of the AI/ML technology that we've been developing internally. I'm not really qualified to speak about this, I'm afraid, so I really do encourage you to join the talk at 11:30, where the team will go into a lot more detail. We've made a series of new improvements to this product lineup. We've been improving Grafana alerting now for the best part of a year, and we'll continue to with better templating, better error handling. With On-Call, we're launching a scheduling UI. So you can now kind of within the app configure who's on call when. And we previously were relying on Google Calendar and Terraform to do that. And then with Grafana Incident, we've got a couple of new features. We've got the ability to search and filter incidents inside the app. We also will suggest related dashboards during an incident based on some AI/ML techniques. So yeah, find out more at the session at 11:30. OK, so hopefully now you understand how we're trying to curate the open source experience into kind of an easier to use, opinionated and integrated platform. Right? This should be really quick, 5 minutes to get started with. You should be, this is really aimed at those people who don't have that time or expertise to self-assemble the DIY approach. But it's all still powered by open source. It's all still powered by the same projects you know and love, the same ones you can go on GitHub and download. And so the message really I want to leave you with is, with the LGTM platform, we opened up all of our backends. With Grafana, we've always been this composable big tent strategy. But now with Grafana Cloud, hopefully you see it's easy to get started as well. OK, and with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Merle, who's going to talk about K6 and front-end observability.
Hey, everybody. My name is Merle Kranz. I'm an engineering director at Grafana Labs. How many of y'all are looking forward to Thanksgiving? Yeah? Is anybody got an on-call schedule at Thanksgiving? Yeah? So we all know that Thanksgiving is a time when load increases on some people's websites. And maybe you're wondering if your website can handle that load. The easiest way to find that out is to try it out. And this is what K6 does. K6 is a performance load testing tool that makes it possible to test when it's not so critical, whether or not your website can handle those loads when it is critical. To put it in the terms of the turkey, the easiest way to determine if you can lift that 25-pound turkey when it's steaming hot is to try it when it's not steaming hot. Testing is something that you should be doing all the time, just like cooking is something that you do every day, right? But there is a problem with testing data. Testing data is black box data. So if we imagine we ran a test, we increased load, and we determined that latencies increased as the load increased. Well, that's an example of black box data. We know what's happening, but we don't necessarily know why it's happening. In order to figure out why it's happening, we need the white box data. The white box data comes from the components that Tom was just presenting to us. So you can see what your application says happens, what the traces are, what the metrics are, what the log messages say, and look in that to find the root cause for the problem that you saw with your testing data. However, that can be difficult because you're switching contexts, right? You look in your K6 data, you see these graphs that show you, hey, here's the problem. You look in your tempo data, and you see what's going on, but you're switching all the time, and it can be very hard to keep track of where you're at. Which is why at Grafana Labs, we are introducing an industry-first integration between performance data, that's the black box data, and distributed tracing, which is your white box data. This is a private beta. And as I said, this is unique amongst observability solutions out there in the industry. So what does this do for you, or how does it work? Now remember, I mentioned the problem statement. This is, you've got, you just did your load test. You just determined that, that the latency increases. And now what you want to know is why. So you go into tempo. And what K6 did here is K6 starts the traces and propagates them into the backend services so that you can see what's going on in the various endpoints. You can see maybe there's an error that's occurring. Maybe some endpoints are being called more frequently than others. And maybe some of the endpoints have a disturbing amount of time that they're taking to return. And you can figure out which endpoint you want to explore more closely and follow these patterns and narrow your search space so you're not searching across your entire application. And once you've found that metric that you want to look at, you can dig in, right? So here we're looking at a get endpoint, and you can see based on the graph that oh, the latency on this endpoint is increasing across the course of this test. And you can also see the spots on there are exemplars. You can actually also dig into those exemplars, and you can see exactly what the call stack was there. Now, I'm not going to do that now, because we've got a session this afternoon at 2:45 where you can see the whole course and see the solution to this mystery. But you'll click on that blue button, and you'll see what happens next. As I said, Mark and Lucas and Y will be presenting this afternoon, so go check out their session. And if you're interested in joining this private beta, you'll see out in the lobby there'll be QR codes, or you can talk to the experts and sign up for the beta to try this out on your own systems. So not only are we trying to make it so that those problems never happen in the first place on your infrastructure, we're also looking up the stack. We are introducing a solution for front-end application observability today. Just like it is important for you to make sure your oven temperature is right for the turkey, you still need to know what's actually going to your customers. The front end is what your customers see. The front end is what they touch. That is where they access the value that your company has to offer. And it's also harder to monitor than other things, because what happens on the front end doesn't happen on a computer that's under your control. It happens on your client's computers. So that is why Grafana Labs is introducing an open source project called Grafana Pharaoh. This is a very lightweight JavaScript library that you can add to your JavaScript web applications. As I said, this is completely open source. You can use this to collect logs, metrics, and traces. And you can, if you want, you can set up, we are nothing if not composable. You can set up the stack so that you can capture those in Loki and Mimir, in Loki and Tempo, and visualize those with Grafana. Or you can let us do that for you. We are also launching front-end application observability in Grafana Cloud. This means that we can stand this all up and capture those logs and metrics and traces and let you see what's going on in your front-end application. And all you have to do is embed that little library in your front end. And that is very, very easy. All you have to do is pull down the NPM package and add 2 lines of code to your application. And then you're done. That is all you have to do. We are already using this at Grafana Labs to monitor some of our front ends. So for example, the authentication app that you use to sign into Grafana Cloud is instrumented with Grafana Pharaoh. And this is live data. This is what is actually coming in right now across our authentication app. You can see here the time to first byte, which gives you an indication of how long until your website is coming up on your users' computers. You can see the first contentful paint, which gives you an indication of how long until you can actually see, until your users can actually see something. You can see first input delay. All of these metrics are part of a package of metrics defined by Google called Web Vitals. Web Vitals as a whole give you an understanding of how the performance of your application is perceived by your users. But Google also uses Web Vitals as an input into their ranking algorithm. So if you're interested in SEO, these will also be relevant for you. What's more, you can see what exceptions are happening in your web app. And you can see in what, excuse me, sorry. You can see in what browser those exceptions are occurring. And you can see in general what, sorry, this is lagging a bit. You can see which browsers your users are using in general. So if, for example, you're introducing a feature that requires certain things from your browser, you can check and see, oh, are my users using browsers that are compatible with this feature that I want to introduce? And what's more, you can also look at RUM events. RUM is called Real User Monitoring. You can go into your web application and you can actually instrument for specific events that you would like to follow as your user tries them out through the application. So for example, the sign-up app is actually very simple. You can see when people actually authenticate or when people actually log in this particular case, and you can also follow it by session ID. You can do all of these things And all you had to do was add those 2 lines of code into your web app. So if you're interested, all right, there we go. So if you're interested in learning more about this, I suggest you go to the GitHub repo. You can look at the code. It's all open source, like I said. And we are also opening up a private beta. So again, you can see QR codes outside, or you can approach us to sign up for the private beta to try this out with your application. Now, we're doing all of this because although we do love Grafana On-Call and Grafana Incident, we know you don't want to see them at Thanksgiving. We think you would probably rather be eating your Thanksgiving leftovers and hanging out with Grandma. And with that, let me hand it back over to Tom.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you very much. OK, so this is the bit I've actually wanted to talk about for like a year now. So bear with me on this one. I want to spend the next, I think it says 10 minutes here. I think it's going to be 15. Talking about the work we've been doing across the stack on each of the projects and giving everyone kind of a turn in the spotlight. So lots of exciting announcements. First off, talk about Loki. Loki, as Raj introduced, Loki's our log aggregation system. This is quickly becoming kind of the second biggest project at Grafana Labs. We're seeing over 100,000 Loki clusters in the wild. This is incredible for a project that didn't exist 4 years ago. It's the fastest growing in terms of volume on Grafana Cloud. The growth rate is somewhere between kind of 5x and 10x a year in terms of volume, which is just like astronomical. Before I talk about this slide, at Grafana Labs, we're not really into big bang releases, right? I'm not going to stand up here and announce like new versions of every piece of software. We like incremental progress, right? We like to do a regular cadence of kind of continuous innovation and improvement. And the release cadence on Loki has been pretty high. You know, we've been doing a release every quarter. We've been bundling mostly focused on kind of performance improvements, stability improvements, as well as making Loki easier to use, easier to run, and more cost effective. So I want to highlight just in the past year 2 or 3 things that we've launched in Loki. We launched out-of-order ingestion for logs. So this is incredibly important if you integrate with a legacy system or a system that maybe doesn't preserve the order of logs. This was probably the #1 requested feature from the community and really helps bring Loki to a wider audience. We've also improved the performance. I mean, we run Loki in Grafana Cloud. We probably run some of the biggest Loki clusters in the world. And every performance improvement gets tested in Grafana Cloud, gets really kind of honed and tuned there before we kind of make it into a release. So we did, I mean, this is something I'm really excited about, right? We did a series of optimizations in the Golang regex library. I know that might not sound that kind of exciting, but it massively accelerated Loki queries. And the team has been upstreaming these back into Golang standard library so that everyone in the community can benefit. We've parallelized binary operations and instant queries. So if you kind of want to know the answer to, oh, you know, how many exceptions did I have over the past 6 hours, that query is now super fast and real time, so you can do that in a dashboard. We've also added deletion and filtering out of results out of the logs in the queries. Again, probably now the second biggest requested feature. And I know I said I wasn't going to do big releases, and I'm going to just kind of tease the next release. Loki 2.7 is coming soon, coming in the next week, maybe, a release candidate, Ed? Yeah, we can all ask Ed that question later and see what the result is. So let's look at Loki 2.7. As with all the previous releases, our focus has been on performance and on resource usage and on TCO. And with Loki 2.7, we're moving to a new index format based on Prometheus's TSDB. This has allowed us to accelerate queries up to 4 times faster and use 50% less CPU whilst doing this. And this is all because the index we're using is now a quarter of the size of the previous BoltDB index. It's going to be huge. We've seen in testing over 400 gigabytes a second performance within a single query. So this isn't GA yet. You know, we'll be putting out a release candidate as soon as Ed's not on the road. Yep, he's smiling at me. But yeah, we need your help. Test this out. Tell us how it works. Find bugs with us, and we'll fix them, and then we'll get this to GA as quickly as possible. So next up, oh yeah, one more thing about Loki. One of the new things we're launching in Grafana Cloud is the ability, I internally call this bring your own bucket. You can provide us with access to an S3 bucket, and we will, through Grafana Cloud, store all your logs in that bucket. And this means you own the logs. You're not relying on our storage. If you want to move to open source, you can. If you want to run your own analysis on these logs without going through Loki's APIs, you can. It also dramatically lowers the cost of long-term storage. And yeah, all you need to do is provision an S3 bucket or a GCS bucket and send us the credentials. So if this is something you're interested in, there'll be a QR code on outside somewhere. And yeah, scan that, talk to one of the team, and we'll get you signed up for this. So next up, Grafana, right? The center of our ecosystem. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about Grafana. It has a whole conference to itself. Who here was at GrafanaCon? Actually, it was virtual this year, wasn't it? Yeah. So who here watched GrafanaCon? Okay, a few of you, yeah? So Grafana is our most popular project, right? It's the project the company was started around. It's got over 1 million active instances in the wild, and over 10 million active users. It's truly astounding. These are figures that you seldom see in kind of mobile games. It's also got 50,000 GitHub stars, which is, obviously where the real value is. And again, with Grafana, it's the same with Loki. Incremental improvements, a constant cadence of releases. We released Grafana version 9 at GrafanaCon in June. And this saw, as I mentioned, the GA of Grafana alerting. We also launched new Prometheus and Loki data sources, which allow you to kind of graphically build a query, so you don't now need to learn PromQL or LogQL to use them. And we've just been improving things ever since. We've done numerous, there's just too many improvements to list on the slide, numerous alerting and reporting and transform enhancements. We've improved the widgets for the geo map, for the heat map. Yeah, lots of things. Anything else? Well, the one thing I want to kind of highlight maybe is alerting. We've been receiving a lot of feedback from the community. We are listening to the community on this, and we are investing a huge amount of time and effort in making the new Grafana alerting as easy as possible to use. And we really value the feedback. We realize we're probably not quite there yet. So please keep it coming and bear with us whilst we work on that. Tempo, next up Tempo. Tempo is one of our newest projects here. It's a distributed tracing database. It's highly scalable and cost-effective, so much so you don't need to do sampling. You can store a distributed trace for every single one of your queries. And this was really its USP. We launched this in October 2020 as a kind of v0.1, and we went GA in June in 21. It's got about 5,000 instances in the wild. It's got 2,000 GitHub stars, according to this slide. And again, the same pattern, right? Constant innovation. We're always launching new features. We're always listening to what the community is looking for. Tempo 1.0 launched without the ability to search for a trace. Right? We were highly focused just on the most cost-effective way of storing traces. So in Tempo 1.2 and Tempo 1.3, we added search for your traces. We also added the ability to generate metrics from traces on ingestion. This is a pretty cool feature that we're using to really power a lot of the kind of APM-like experiences that we're building in Grafana. And finally, probably most excitingly, we've launched an experimental Parquet storage engine. Right, and this is the new kind of columnar storage engine that we've launched for Tempo. Incredibly fast, it's got fantastic performance. And that was experimental in 1.5. Thank you to everyone who's been testing it out. And today, or soon at least, we'll be launching Tempo v.2. Again, there'll probably be an RC coming out in the next week or two. And then we really look for everyone to kind of help us with that. But first, what's in Tempo 2.0? So Tempo 2.0, I think, is going to be a huge step for the project. Who here was familiar with Loki 1.0? I mean, that was probably the last time I actually wrote any code, so sorry about that. With the way we try to release projects at Grafana Labs, we really focus on the MVP, right? So in Loki 1.0, as with Tempo 1.0, we were focused on scalable and very cost-effective storage of logs and traces. And this does mean, we really want to prove out the concept, but it does mean maybe we're missing a few features in our 1.0 products. With Loki 2.0, which we released about a year after 1.0, we introduced a query language, LogQL, right? The ability to actually kind of search your logs more intelligently, to extract metrics from them, and really kind of manipulate and analyze your log data and use it to power dashboards. And this really transformed the Loki project into what it is today. And so kind of following in that pattern with Tempo 2.0, we're launching a query language for tracing, right? This is pretty new. I'm not actually aware of anyone out there with something similar to this, and it's something I'm incredibly excited about. The query language, I guess you don't go to a lot of conferences and see people rave about query languages on stage. The query language is inspired by LogQL and PromQL. So if you're familiar with any of those projects, you should be able to jump right into Tempo. It allows you to interactively extract and search through your logs. So you can pull data, traces. You can pull data out of your traces. You can find specific things. The thing I'm probably the most excited about that will be coming in kind of future phases of the language is the ability to find and analyze traces based on their structure. So you can search for traces that maybe have a master span with this particular attribute and then children span with other attributes and really kind of match kind of the structure of the trace. I think the thing that makes me the most excited about this is we kind of don't know what people are going to do with this. You know, we're really excited to see what this kind of power in a tracing backend, you know, what applications this enable. I talked earlier about the Prometheus, the Kubernetes app that we built into Grafana. Behind the scenes, that's just issuing PromQL back to Mimir to build the views. And I kind of think maybe in the future we're going to start seeing really exciting apps like that built on top of Tempo, issuing TraceQL commands. So yeah, try it out, see what you think, and let us know what you build with it. Right then, last one, Mimir. Mimir is the newest project here, right? We only launched this 7 months ago. But really, the project's kind of also one of the oldest. It's been around for 5 years in one form or another. And I really think of Mimir as the spiritual successor to Cortex. Cortex was a horizontally scalable version of Prometheus. And Mimir was the project we launched 7 months ago that allowed us to release a lot of the previously closed enterprise-only features into open source. So we released things like a horizontally scalable compaction, a really sophisticated way of parallelizing queries. And we also use this as an opportunity to massively simplify Cortex. We removed code that no one had used for years. We drastically improved the configuration. And we wrote some pretty decent docs that I'm really proud of. It's early days for Mimir still. It's only been out for 7 months. But as with all our other projects, we've been really aggressively pushing through the releases. So some of the more exciting stuff recently in Mimir has been the addition of out-of-order ingestion, similar to Loki. Right? This allows you to integrate with things like Influx, Datadog, OpenTelemetry ingestion, and really makes Mimir more than just a scalable version of Prometheus. This is really, hopefully now, the most scalable time series database for all metric forms. We also added, as I mentioned, we added OpenTelemetry ingestion. We think this was the first kind of time series database to natively ingest OpenTelemetry metrics. And I talked about this novel technique for parallelizing queries. You know, I remember thinking PromQL as a language would be really hard to kind of build a parallel, you know, distributed query engine for, and really needed as the kind of volumes of data that people push into these systems get bigger. But the team's been working incredibly hard on finding new and interesting techniques, and we're now pretty confident that this is the fastest PromQL engine in the world. So today, oh no, not today, I'm not announcing anything for Mimir. It's interesting, right? 2.3 was our big release that we did. It was just over a month ago. And that really had a lot of the kind of most exciting features that we'd been waiting for. Funnily enough, the marketing team kind of wanted me to hold it for this conference, but we just want to get the releases out to you as soon as possible. I want to, you know, Mimir is a little bit different as well, right? Because the relationship with the Prometheus project is incredibly strong, right? First and foremost, Mimir is a compatible Prometheus database, 100% compatible. What this means is that instead of driving a lot of these features into Mimir first, we put them in Prometheus first and then consume them into Mimir. So an example here will be we added support for things like subqueries to PromQL. We added support for exemplars, which Merle was showing earlier. We've added support for all sorts of things into Prometheus first and then vendored them into Mimir. This means that if you build a dashboard against Prometheus, you're guaranteed to get the same result against Mimir. And if you want to use a different Prometheus-compatible database, you can, and you'll always get the same result. This is also one of the reasons at Grafana Labs we kind of work with and employ the most Prometheus maintainers. I think there are now about 10 Prometheus team at Grafana Labs. So I want to talk about 2 things coming into Prometheus, 2 things that we're working on, and 2 things that we're going to drive into Mimir shortly after. So the first one, and you probably get the theme now, right? We're really obsessed about performance. We've been driving a huge number of optimizations into Prometheus. I mean, these are the GitHub PRs. So we've removed transaction isolation for head compaction. This is something that was unnecessarily and kind of 50% reduction in memory usage here. We've done a lot of work on kind of profiling Prometheus and TSDB to find areas where we can remove garbage, because memory management in Go is kind of still tricky, and if you can remove garbage, it generally makes everything better. And then one of the things I'm very excited about, this is a huge change, we've changed the encoding of labels in memory to make it much, much more efficient. The labels in memory in Prometheus and Mimir actually consume a vast majority of the space in the memory in your server. So being able to make these more efficient makes Prometheus much more scalable and also makes Mimir more scalable. One of the features that's been coming for years now and been really kind of tricky to get right is the support for native histograms. So this allows us to it allows you to use histograms, which you use for kind of quantiles and percentiles inside Prometheus. It allows you to use them without having to pre-declare the buckets. Right? It gives you much, much higher definition on them. They also consume less space, and they're much more efficient. And this is kind of going to bring Prometheus, I think, right up to date with modern monitoring techniques. And that graph, that picture there of that panel with the Grafana logo is actually the heat map panel with a kind of fake histogram that we've built that looks like Grafana. So we're not going to spend any time talking about these at the conference this time. There's no talk I can refer you to. This is because next week in Munich is the Prometheus Community Conference, PromCon. And there's still tickets available. If anyone happens to be like flying back to Europe or wants to go, I'd encourage you to go. It's not associated with Grafana other than we're talking there and we massively support it. But yeah, I'd really encourage you to find out more at PromCon next week. So, a different story. And I want to tell the story of Prometheus adoption inside a large organization, right? It always starts with individual teams. Normally a developer will go and download Prometheus, instrument their applications, they'll wire it all up, and they'll build some dashboards, and bingo, like it all kind of works really well. If the team has challenges with, I don't know, like a cardinality explosion because they've instrumented something incorrectly, that blast radius is contained just to their Prometheus and just to their application. They can go and tweak the instrumentation and the metrics that they're exposing and really work in nice, tight feedback loops. They own the monitoring and the app at the same time. This is how Prometheus was always meant to work. Then normally someone in the organization kind of notices this, right? Prometheus expertise is normally kind of spread very thinly across every team. Maybe teams that don't have that expertise are struggling to adopt Prometheus. So someone notices this, they bring all the expertise together, and they start offering Prometheus as a service, right? And this is great, this brings it to teams that previously maybe didn't have access to it. Centralizing that expertise, allowing those teams to specialize, means they can do more and get deeper into the kind of observability space. This also drives a huge uptick in Prometheus usage within the organization. But even this model has some challenges, right? The team responsible for running that central kind of Prometheus service, be it Mimir or another technology, they lose influence over the demand for that service, right? They lose that feedback loop that I was talking about before. With that massive uptick in usage and maybe a cardinality explosion here or there, they've kind of lost the ability to control that. They've lost the ability to influence it. And this can lead to kind of unpredictable growth, unpredictable kind of cardinality, and generally like real challenges managing the volume and size of these central clusters. We had this problem at Grafana Labs. We didn't know it at the time, but our central kind of Prometheus service that we use, we heavily dog-food all of our tools, had grown to over 100 million active series. And we were spending quite a lot of money running our own Prometheus monitoring to monitor Grafana Cloud. And so about a year ago, we started out kind of thinking about what we could do about this. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the solution that we've built. So we analyze in real time all of the dashboards, the alerts, the ad hoc queries that you're running against the service. We compare those to the series that you're sending, the metrics and the series that you're sending to us, and we identify unused labels and unused metrics, right? We then intelligently aggregate the data before it gets ingested into the service in a way that makes it completely transparent to these queries. And actually, kind of more excitingly, we notice things like the metrics that you don't query. We had a big debate internally. Do we just drop these? Do people actually want them if they're not querying them? But no, we actually look at the labels, we look at the churn and the cardinality of labels, and we look for intelligent ways to summarize the metrics that you're not using. So they consume very little space, but that they're still there if you need them. And this approach is incredibly powerful, right? It adapts as your query patterns change over time, it adapts to your usage, right? So if you do start querying one of those unused metrics, suddenly we'll stop aggregating it so aggressively and we'll make more of the data available to you. And it's done so in a transparent fashion. You don't need to modify your dashboards. You don't need to modify your alerts. This is done behind the scenes. You won't notice. And it works even with metrics that you can't actually modify. Let's say you're using a third-party piece of software. Let's say you're using Kubernetes. You can't go in necessarily and change the metrics in Kubernetes, at least not as easily as your own application code. And this technique will still massively reduce the kind of cardinality from those metrics. Actually, that's one of the biggest savings we found internally was kind of aggregating a lot of the Kubernetes metrics that we weren't using. The savings we've seen have been pretty big. As I said, we're over 100 million metrics in our ops cluster. 50% of them went unused. We've managed to aggregate that down to a very small amount. And of the ones that were used, we've still managed to make some pretty decent savings. We've made almost a 60% reduction in the size of this ops cluster, transparently, without anyone having to notice. So it's still early days for this technique. We're working with a handful of early customers, and we're looking for more users who would be interested in it. There, again, will be a QR code somewhere and someone you can sign up and talk to about it. But this, I think, is the future of Prometheus metrics. I think you don't have to worry about cardinality in that future. And it's really kind of cool because the value that you get from using Prometheus metrics really ties more closely to the queries that you run and not to the data that you're sending. And this ties the cost of the system and to the value that you're getting from it. So it's something I'm really excited about. It's giving control back to the teams, to those central teams that run the service where previously they didn't have it. So yeah, if you want to learn more, the last talk of the day, 4 p.m., is going to be going into a deep dive across Loki, across Tempo, across Mimir, and it's going to talk about the aggregation as well. So I've kind of, wrapped up a quick summary here of the progress we've been making on LGTM and on logs and metrics and traces in particular. Lots of exciting new capabilities, and hopefully you really get a feeling for the kind of cadence of releases we're doing at Grafana Labs. I'm super proud of the team. A lot of them are here. A lot of them have worked incredibly hard. I think it's really taken like a village to get this done. And there is one more thing, though, that I want to announce. This is the thing Raj was teasing at the beginning, the thing we've kind of been building up for. This is the last thing we're going to talk about, don't worry. We're now bringing continuous profiling to Grafana. We think there's no room for another pillar of observability. We're bringing continuous profiling. This is the regular collection of memory and CPU profiles. It helps you with things like program optimization. It helps you with identifying kind of tail latencies and reducing those. It helps you with optimizing your TCO. It also can, for instance, diagnose why pods are ooming. Bringing it to Grafana means you can see it alongside your metrics, alongside your traces, alongside your logs. You can correlate between the two. And you really get the experience that you've come to expect. So first, we're going to add a data source for Parker. Parker is a project some friends of ours over at Polar Signals started. It's an open source project. It has a really innovative eBPF-based agent that means you can collect these profiles without changing your code. It uses open standards such as pprof to propagate that data and has an efficient kind of single node storage and query engine, very much like Prometheus. So we're bringing that in. We're bringing the flame graph and the Parker data source into Grafana. But we're not stopping there. So we've got one more announcement to make. And that's we're launching our own continuous profiling project. We're launching Grafana Flare. This is a continuous profiling. It's horizontally scalable, highly available, multi-tenant. It uses the same architecture as Loki, as Tempo, as Mimir. If you've run any of these or used any of these projects, you'll know how to use Flare. And best of all, we finally got to use the PH from when we were naming Grafana. So I'm not actually going to talk any more about this. I'd like to invite the tech lead for Flare on stage, Cyril Tervena.
Ooh, hey guys. Well, I'm super excited today to launch this new project, Grafana Flare. And what would be a better way than starting with a demo? So I'm going to do a quick demo to show you how this works in Grafana. All right. So this is the Grafana Flare data source plugin in Grafana. So I want to show you how it works. The first thing is we need to select a profile type. So there's like multiple different type of profile depending on the analysis that you want to do. So we're going to select CPU sample right now. And then using Prometheus label matcher, I'm going to select the workload that I want to analyze. So I'm going to look into the Loki namespace because I used to work on Loki, so I like to see how Loki is doing. I'm going to focus on the ingesters of Loki, right? And then there's another option. I can group the data of the histogram, we'll see after, using a label. So I'm going to use the pod label, because I want to see how the distribution is. And I'm going to run that. All right, it works. Okay. So the first part here, as we see, it's actually a Grafana graph that you can use to drill down into a specific time range that you are interested into, right? And then the second part is the profiling, very popular visualization, flame graph, and we're going to dig into this. So I want to just very quickly tell you how it works. So the horizontal axis, so this one here, right? That's not the right one. Give me a sec. Right. So this horizontal axis here is the resource usage. So the wall length is the total usage, but as bigger your box is, the more resource has been used. And then the vertical axis here is actually the stack traces. So the stack traces is the call hierarchy. So the deeper you go, the more function call you have, right? So you can use actually the flame graph and drill down into specific stack trace, and then start to look at what are the inner functions. So there's not a lot on that one. One sec, it's lagging a bit. All right. So there's now we can see like multiple different paths, and I can see which one is maybe doing a bit of CPU usage. But that's not all. Obviously, if you're lost, you can always reset, go back, and then search for a function. So I'm going to search for malloc. And it gives you like, very quickly a quick view of all the allocation that are happening across all your code of the ingester in this case. All right, that's it for the demo. We're going to make this project live right now together. So that's the repo, which is like private right now. I just want to bring your attention down to this button here, right? This one. Just make sure you don't miss it. There's already 85 stars, which is probably just Grafana folks. But I expect 280s after this conference. So I think it's there. I don't do that very often.
Has legal approved this, by the way, sir?
Yes, I think so, yeah. Change the visibility. Oh, that's math. I want to make it public. I hope I have the right, but I think I do. It's going to ask me. So this is the first time I do it. That was an, yeah. All right, it's not delete. All right. Oh, obviously. Well, that's security, Bear with me. There you go. Should be fine. Yay! All right. Can we go back to the slide? OK. So this was a very quick demo. I'm doing a session at the end of the day at 4 p.m. with the whole LGTM team. And I'm actually going to do a bigger demo where I'm explaining how I found performance improvement in Loki and actually end up with a PR. So I'm going to show that. And I'll be all day at the Ask the Expert. So if you want to talk about continuous profiling, find me. And there's the URL of the repo if you want to start. Very important. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.